Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to those and yourself who are out there. Welcome to my weekly lifetime presentation on various topics that you have sent in and requested information on. And today's topic is on something that I think you'll find more than fascinating. Freud used the terms ego, id, and superego. It was called the tripartite aspect of the psyche. He broke the psyche down into these components. This has led to much confusion of people throughout the next decades to follow. And there have been many interpretations of what these mean and what they represent. And I've seen many pieces of literature, particularly Eastern mysticism, that has said we need to get rid of our ego, and the ego's bad, and you've got a big ego, and they've used these terms, in my opinion, out of context. And I'd like to do my best to try to clarify what these components meant, put it into a model that will make them very sensible, and show you how they overlap with the things that I've been presenting many times on values. So if you've got your pen and paper or your notepad or somehow to take notes, I have a feeling you probably want to have these notes and use them interacting with other people. Now, in order to do it justice, I would wisely start with the area of human values, because that's really where this comes from. No drive in human beings comes without looking at human values. So every human being has a set of priorities, a set of values, things that are most to least important in their life. And whatever is highest on an individual's values, they are spontaneously inspired from within to pursue them and fulfill them. But whatever is low or lower on their values, they tend to procrastinate, hesitate, and frustrate in the pursuit of them. And they'll require extrinsic motivation to get them to do it. A punishment if they don't do it, a reward if they do, is almost required for them to keep being reminded and motivated to do it. But you are intrinsically called and spontaneously active on the things that are really important to you. And because the things that are really important to you, you excel at, you tend to expand, you tend to achieve. This highest value is one of the most important things to identify in your life and to structure your life around. Your identity revolves around it. Where you learn most revolves around it. What you have as a purpose revolves around it. It's a crucial component of mastery. Now, Freud, if you were to superimpose Freud's language on top of the hierarchy of values that each individual has, the expression and fulfillment of your highest value is what he would call the true ego. Ego just means I, or self, true self. Now, sometimes Eastern mystics want you to think that you want to get rid of your ego, want to get rid of your mind, and you want to be just spiritual and this kind of thing. But I dare you to fulfill that and pull it off. I've seen mystics spend their whole life doing that, and they still have a mind and they still have their ego. And so that's delusional at best and misleading at most, and very commonly sells to people that are new on the journey. But your ego, true ego, is just yourself. It's your essential self, not just your existential, volatile personas and masks that you wear during the day, but your essential self, the true you. When you're in tears of gratitude, you're authentic, you're not judging, you're embracing yourself and others, and you're seeing things the way they are, where there's nothing to fix or change. You're in an awe state of thanks. That's your essential self. So when you're living in alignment and congruent with what you value most, because you are willing to embrace both pain and pleasure in it, it's so important to you that it doesn't matter what the obstacles are, you'll turn them into opportunities. You'll see it as feedback, not failure. You have a more objective view and embrace both sides of life and see both sides. And so in the area of your highest values, this is what Freud was calling the true ego. So in my case, I have a high value on teaching and learning, as you probably guessed. And as a result of it, When I'm teaching and I'm researching and I'm sharing what I discover and I'm inspired by that and I get to do what I loved every day doing it. This is when I'm being true to myself, my true self, my true I, my true ego. And I don't think there's anybody that doesn't want to live that way. In fact, because your values are unique and you have a hierarchy of values that are completely fingerprint specific, when you are living in alignment and congruent with what those highest values are, you automatically make the biggest difference because you're not subordinating to conforming to other people. You're being unique to you and you're pursuing what's most meaningful and inspiring to you. And this is where you're most disciplined, reliable, and focused and tend to achieve more and expand yourself. And when you go and pursue that, when you achieve more, you tend to want to achieve even more. You want to tackle more challenges. And you gain confidence and you wake up a leader, you emerge as an authentic individual. And this is the true ego. And Freud was trying to get people to get in that state. And there's nothing unwise about that. And many people have confused because that's the area where we expand and achieve more. That was misconstrued by puffing yourself up and making yourself bigger than you are. That's not the true ego. That's a false pride position confused with the true ego that Freud was trying to reference. So if you're trying to get rid of your ego, you're trying to get rid of your authentic self, and that's kind of foolish. So your real self is an expression. Now, you could get really esoteric and you could say, well, if I'm in a deep meditation and I'm in a transcendent state and I'm not even attached to a form and I can go beyond that, I can go beyond my identification of the ego. Well, that's maybe true for a moment, but you're not going to spend your life there. You're not going to get much done. You're just going to sit and meditate. If you think that that's the way to live your life, well, then go off to the mountains somewhere. But that's not going to make you self-actualize and make a difference in the world and give you fulfillment. Your fulfillment will also come from making a contribution to people and engaging and interacting and reflecting and learning and many other things. So I'm not in favor of escapism, confused with spiritual paths. I'm interested in helping you master your life and maximize your potential. In all my programs, including the Breakthrough Experience, which is my signature program, that's the primary aim. The primary objective is to give you a strategy and permission, if you will, to yourself to live an authentic self, the essential self, and access your ground of being in your daily life and not escape. Now, that's the ego. And the ego is not something you need to get rid of. In fact, you won't ever get rid of it. And anybody who claims to have gotten rid of it is delusional. You're not going to. You may get rid of your personas and your masks and facades and puffed up state, but you're not going to get rid of your essential self. And you have no reason to. Now there's also the id. Now the id, Freud called the impulsive, instinctual, reactive kind of animal reactions. And this is the immediate gratifying, hedonic, pursuing, addictive kind of personality. And this is the kind of the ungoverned, uncontrolled, immediate gratifying part. So when we're living or attempting to live in other people's values, so let's say we walk in a mall and we meet somebody and we think, well, they're smarter, they're more intelligent, they're more successful, they have more money, they have more stable relationship, they're more socially savvy, they're more physically fit, they're more spiritually aware. The moment we see them and compare ourselves to them and put them on a pedestal and minimize ourselves in comparison and kind of envy them and try to imitate them, we'll inject their values into our life, confuse ourselves about what's really important. I've been doing value determination process in the Breakthrough Experience and online for many, many years. Over 42 years I've been studying values. And many people, if I ask them what their values are, they'll tell you social idealisms that everybody expects them instead of look at what their life demonstrates. So the moment you subordinate to the people and you're too humble to admit what you see in the people around you, inside you, and kind of minimize yourself and shrink instead of stand up and expand, which is your true self, what happens is when you inject those values, you cloud the clarity of your own mission and purpose, which is your highest value, which is your identity, your true identity, and you automatically shrink. And that's why they call them shrinks, going to the shrink. You're going to somebody who's going to buy into your message and your illusion of your shrunkness. And what's interesting is that when you're not living by your highest values, you're unfulfilled. And when you're unfulfilled, you search for immediate gratification to compensate for that unfulfillment. I've said for years in the breakthrough experience and help people in the breakthrough experience transcend these states, because what happens is they go through and they go into addictive, impulsive, compulsive, immediate gratifying behavior, which is consumption, which is fantasy seeking, which is overeating, which is purchasing and consumption, where they sacrifice their own identity to try to buy into other people's identities, to feel better about themselves and to stuff them fulfilled because they're not fulfilled living by their highest values. So they try to fulfill themselves up by consumption and eating and other things. And these addictive behaviors or dopamine fixes to make them feel temporarily high by sexuality or drugs or whatever to escape, to get a high because they're unfulfilled. And really, when we're unfulfilled, it's a feedback to us to let us know we're not in our true ego. We're not allowing ourselves to pursue what's truly most important and highest on our values. And it's just a feedback. It's nothing that there's nothing wrong with this really. It's just our body doing its job. Whenever we're not living by our highest values, we create symptoms and we become compulsive and unfulfilled. And we want to go live off other people's accomplishments. We become hero worshipers instead of becoming the hero. And we buy things and blow our wealth instead of building a brand around ourselves. We live vicariously through other people's brands because we're minimizing ourselves. And this immediate gratifying, impulsive, instinctual to avoid discomfort and pain and impulse to get pleasure quickly is the id. That's why you shrink in that area, because whenever you're living by lower values, you procrastinate, hesitate, frustrate. You don't achieve. You doubt yourself. You even brain offload. That's why you give power to everybody else and want their decisions to make decisions for you. And that's why you become part of the herd there. And this is where you shrink and lose your power, at least temporarily, unless you listen to the symptoms and go back to priority. See, if you're not living your life by highest priority actions that wake up the true ego and filling your day with things that inspire you, that you know your life revolves around, you're going to end up beating yourself up. And you're designed to. You're designed to self-depreciate anytime you try to live by lower values. So the moment you subordinate to other people, compare yourself to them, minimize you, inject their values, try to live in their values, scatter yourself from your own highest value, which is where your true ego is, you're going to wake up your id. And your id is the idiot, the shrunken psyche. Iota means tiny, and id means the smaller aspect of our nature, you might say, the impulsive part of our nature. And we let our amygdala run our life instead of our executive center. When we live by our highest values, the blood glucose and oxygen goes into the executive center, and our brain gets inspired vision, strategic planning, executing of plans, self-governance, and mastery. But when we try to live in lower values because of comparison of other people, because we judge instead of love, doing what we love, we tend not to judge. If we do what we judge, we tend not to love. When we're going through and judging, compare ourselves, trying to change others to be like us, which is futile, or trying to change us to be like others, which is futile, we wake up the id and we end up an idiot, because it's an idiot to try to think that we can make other people live in our values and we can live in other people's values. We're not going to. Every decision you make is based on what you believe will give you the greatest advantage over disadvantage in the moment to your own values. And if you don't know what your highest values are, that's when you'll brain offload and you'll let other people make decisions for you. And then you'll live with shoulds and ought tos and supposed tos and got tos and have tos and must and need tos, which are imperative languages, which means that there's people on the outside running you instead of you running you. And that's where you're disempowered. That's when you can't. I mean, in the breakthrough experience program, which I've taught for 32 years almost, I've asked people to write down what they want to dedicate their life to, and be surprised how many people have difficulty having clarity about what they want. And deep inside in their heart, their true highest value and ego knows. But all of the inculcation, all the injected values of all the things cloud it, and they're frightened and they're fearing rejection from all their authorities around them. And they're holding themselves back and they're saying, I don't know. But the truth is you do know. Don't let any part of yourself, don't let any other person, individual around you think you don't know. Because the truth is you do. I've been teaching the breakthrough experience and have people that come in here every week and they say, I don't know what my mission is. And I ask them a set of questions to make them look at what their life demonstrates, what they really live, not their fantasies, not what they think it should be. And it's very clear what they're committed to. But what happens is they basically have this cloudiness only because of their comparison. We're not here to compare ourselves to others and put people on pedestals or pits. We're here to compare our own daily actions to our own highest value so we can live authentically by our true essential self, our true ego. So our id is the result of not living congruently with our highest value. There's an old proverb that I stated for many times. If you don't fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, that wake up your true authentic self, your day is going to fill up with low priority distractions because you're going to brain offload and you're going to hesitate, procrastinate, and you're going to end up with depreciating activities. That's the id. And that's why the idiot, which means shrunken psyche, is the result. You shrink yourself instead of shine. And we're not here to shrink, we're here to shine. Now, what's the superego? Freud basically described the superego as the moralizing force inside us that kind of whispers to us. And I'm going to have a little difference than what Freud implied, because I think he missed something in this. But I'll elaborate on what he said, and then I'll explain why I'm going to alter that. When you're a child, when you're 0 to 1 years old, you can poo, you can pee, you can bite, you can scratch, you can throw things, you can scream at the top of your lungs, you can not have sleep, you can do just about anything, and your mom or dad most likely will love you no matter what. So you get about a year of unconditional love. But the second you stand up, so this is, just remember this, when you're really young, don't stand up. I'm joking. When you stand up and start scampering around the room and falling over and scamper around and start pulling on things and start causing disruption around the house, all of a sudden, because mom or dad have difficulty controlling that, because you can get around now, not just crawling, your parents, particularly your mom first, will say, no, 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 stop, stop, yes, yes, yes. And she will start to project her values onto you and give the values according to her, because she's ruler of the house. And all of a sudden she'll give the rules. Now, maybe when dad gets home, there may be a new set of rules that's on top of that, or maybe adjacent to that. But whatever it is, there's a set of rules that come home, and all of a sudden mothers and fathers become the first moralizing, rule-making, hypocritical construction that now goes on the child. So now, until the child's 1, it can get away with just about anything. And you don't really make a big deal out of it. But once it gets 1, it stands up and starts scampering around and starts tearing things up and exploring things and making messes. You start putting, as a parent, right, wrong, stop, go, etc. Once the child, because the child's dependent on you, gets this jolt that says no, and it has a natural impulse with its id to want to go and explore pleasure over pain and ease over difficulty, the parents now put in a moralizing process, and they say no and yes. And so now the child, because it fears loss of the parent, now inculcates that. That's the first subordination to an outer authority that occurs. That's the beginning of the superego. The superego is the internal moralization where the child has an impulse. It also has a true ego, and it has an impulse to go for pleasure. It has an ego to embrace both things reasonably and to live authentically. And then it has a moralizing process that's a first stage of socialization that now says that thou shalt not do this and thou shalt do that. This is the rules of the house. So in order for the child to live in the house, because it doesn't really have probably by 1, it doesn't have an entrepreneurial position, doesn't have its own company yet, it now incorporates that. And it has an internal conflict between mom and dad, or at least mom initially, and its own impulses and its own highest values. And so sometimes it lives by its highest values, sometimes it wants to be impulsive, and now it's got this moralizing parent that's telling them what it is. And the parents sometimes project onto the child what they think needs to be done for the child, but about 80% of the time, the things that they're projecting on the child is not necessarily reasonable or rational. It's to protect the parents from having to face their previous wounds of what they are subconsciously storing in their own mind that they feel ashamed about or guilt about or frightened of. So they go and put the rules on there, basically to stop the child from doing the things that remind them of things that they feel guilty about or been hurt by, wounded by. And they project their wounds and their guilt onto the child without even realizing doing it under the quote of moral development and sometimes moral hypocrisies. Because sometimes the parent doesn't even do what it's telling the child to do. And sometimes the parent, a different parent, does something different and it confuses the child. And of course, the child then leverages one parent against the other in order to get its own ego or its own impulses of the id to be expressed. So there's a 3-way dynamic going on. The id wants immediate gratification, the ego wants to fulfill something deeply meaningful, and the moralization is now the moralizer that says, now thou shalt not do this. So from the first year or so, mommy becomes important, maybe up to 2 and 3, daddy starts coming in. From that point on, then comes preachers or rabbis or gurus or whatever, and churches and synagogues and temples and things sometimes get that in there. And by the time they're 4 or 5, they start getting it from schools. And now the teachers and the rabbis and gurus or whatever, they all become now moralizers, and they project their values onto it. So the child's now trying to find its own identity, its true nature amongst its own impulses and its moralizing constructions. And anytime it feels a conflict between the things that it's supposed to do according to the authorities and what it would love to do, the unfulfillment and the frustration makes it go into its id even more. So now it just wants immediate gratification to compensate for the internal conflict. Whenever we feel we're not able to fulfill our highest values, we go into immediate gratification. And so what happens is then it goes on to preachers, teachers, school teachers, and through elementary school, it's school teachers predominantly and social groups, mom and dad. They still have the rule. You still, until you can stand on your own 2 feet, be completely independent, they got the rules. So you have to figure out how to leverage one of the parents against the other parents. You have to figure out how to lie in order to not get caught doing what you really want to do or your impulses. And this moralizing process shows up in you about whoever you've given authority to. So if you depend on your mommy or you depend on your daddy or you look up to your teacher, whoever you put above you and depend on will inculcate into your psyche and show up as, I should do this. I should have done this. I'm supposed to do this. I have to do this. I got to do this. I must do this. I need to do this. I ought to do this. I have to do this. All of those imperative languages that you hear in your head are not you, the true ego, the true essential self speaking. It is the injected values of some outer authority, could be mom all the way up to some school teacher, etc. When you get to 13 to maybe 18, it now becomes social cliques, groups that you associate with, and maybe a teacher. You may get a job. It may be a boss. And then you graduate from that and you go on to college. It may be professors or it may be bosses that you work for. And your parents may fade a bit, or you may keep it in there. Bowen says that many times people never get past the parent stage of moral development. And Kohlberg says that immediate gratification or the inculcation of the individual authorities of mothers, fathers, preacher, teachers, some people never get beyond that. And they get trapped trying to please their parents all their life. Or they get trapped trying to please little societies that become altruistically sacrificing life to try to fit in for fear of rejection in society. And this is the stages of moral development. And what happens, these are all layers of the superego coming in. Eventually you get to a point where you go on and you start your own company and don't work for somebody else. And now your boss doesn't become your authority. Your teacher doesn't become your authority. Your parents may not even become your authority. Oh, think about it, mom and dad, I may consider that. And you may start to become more of an authority. But now the people that run your industry, the people that oversee your companies, the people that in local governments and mid-governments and whole national governments or global rules, they now are who you subordinate to. So you're working your way up a social ladder of people you subordinate to. If you open up a franchise, the teacher now invites you to school and you get to set the rules. You get to tell people what you do. The teacher listens to you. If you get to grow your business nationally, then the mayor comes to wants you to come and visit him. The governor wants to say hi and take a picture with you. And the people that make the rules now want to listen to you and you get to influence the rules. And so all of a sudden you're gradually liberating yourself from subordinating to the superegos of all the people you've injected values from. And eventually you're rising up and starting to get what Kohlberg calls transcendence. But eventually you get to a global franchise. Let's say you have a company that's global and now the presidents want to meet you and now you're a celebrity in the world. Now you're setting the rules. People want to follow what you're doing instead of you having to follow everybody else's. Eventually you reach a point of transcendence. If you get there, most people don't, but if you did, in the Breakthrough Experience program, that's exactly what I teach people to do, how to transcend the outer influences of these moral constructs, which are hypocrisies in many cases, because the people, even they put those on you, aren't even living them half the time, as McIntyre shows. And so what happens is you're going in there and you're basically trying to live by something that nobody lives by, thinking you're going to get some sort of points by being acknowledged. And then you realize that there's a spectrum of values across the world and you can't please everybody. And you eventually get to a point, maybe by your mid 40s or whatever, you go, I have an identity crisis. What the hell do I really want in life? I'm halfway through the game now. And hopefully you emerge. If not, you're stuck. And your superego rolls you. And you have this internal conflict and this masochism between the superego that basically tells you how you should be. And you block the expression of your own original thinking. And you fit into what Becker would call the collective heroism and become part of the collective herd. Because you're afraid of being rejected. You can't make decisions on your own because of the internal conflict and the cloudiness, and you're trapped. And there's no reason you have to be. You know, so that what I'm going to summarize is this: the superego is the internalization of some out authority's values that you've injected into your life, which creates entropic disorder in your life and conflict inside you between what you truly would love to do, which is your essential self and your true ego, and now this moralizing process. And what's interesting is, and this is where people have gotten astray, whenever you abide by the things that the injected value, the authority of the injected values came from, let's say you look up to somebody and you now live in that value for the day, you feel proud. And that proud is the false ego. And then when you don't do it, you feel shamed. And so what happens is you create this bipolar nature of pride and shame, trying to subordinate and sacrifice your true identity, your true ego, for the false ego of being a good person and getting acknowledged by people who've got a different set of values than you. And you live maybe feeling proud and putting on a pious facade, but you have an internal conflict because the true you is not able to come to the surface. You're afraid now. You've been so acknowledged for being a good person in this society that you've lost yourself. You've lost your soul, if you will. Having the courage, you can walk on coals, you can go and jump bungee jumps, you can do rope climbs, you can do all kind of gimmicks out there to metaphorize courage. But the real courage in life, as I teach in the breakthrough experience, is being able to walk the path of your authentic self. That's what the breakthrough is about. That's what all my programs are about. Everything I'm doing on these weekly programs is for that. So as long as you're subordinating to outer authority and comparing yourself to others and putting them on pedestals and minimizing yourself and injecting their values, you're going to have an internal conflict between your true highest value and your true ego, and the expression of a spontaneous, inspired life where you delegate lower party things that devalue you and get on with the things that you're inspired by that make the biggest difference, that make more meaning out of your life. You're going to have the inculcation of these values from outer authorities and be trapped with an internal conflict. And as a compensation for that, to escape the conflict, you go to the id and you go and you try to get immediate gratification. And 99% of the population in economics are consumers of other people's brands to make them temporarily feel better about themselves because of this. They do the same thing. That's why very few people become the gold medalist or the great Nobel Prize winners or the great leaders in business or spiritual leaders or whatever, because they haven't got the courage to be themselves. They're worried about fitting in instead of standing out. But the willingness to walk the path of the unborrowed visionary in the pursuit of an authentic expression of your own identity and make the difference. How are you going to make a difference fitting in? You're going to make a difference standing out. That is what the breakthrough experience is about. That's what all my programs are about, to give you the tools and science of how to do that. And it's not really that difficult once you're aware of what's going on in your psyche. Your words inside you speak. Whenever you hear yourself saying, I should, I ought to, I'm supposed to, I got to, I have to, I must, that is not you. You don't should yourself. You don't make mistakes in your own values. You only think you made a mistake when you did an action that was inspiring to you that went against the values of some authority, and then you beat yourself up with shame because now you're giving power to their decisions instead of your own. And you offloaded decision making. And you only project should ought to onto other people when you're projecting an expectation on them to live in your values, which they can't. So ultimately, there's no mistakes. There's only perceived mistakes. When you're trying to live in other people's values, you'll think you're making mistakes. When you're trying to get others to live in your values, you'll think they make mistakes. But ultimately, everybody made a decision based on what they felt was most important at that time to their values. So the superego is, in a sense, the dictator inside your head, coming from whoever you've given power to as an authority. In the breakthrough experience, what I do is I have a science called the Demartini method. And we go in there and level the playing field and own the traits of people that we've got above us. So we realize that there's nothing missing in us. We don't have to minimize ourselves and see that they have something we don't. We find out where we have what they have in our own form. This is what's the challenge. As Einstein said, if you're a cat expecting to swim like a fish, you're going to beat yourself up because you don't have the equipment to do the fish swimming. And if you're a fish expecting to climb a tree, you're going to beat yourself up. And this is what people do. They compare themselves to others, expect to live in those people's values, beat themselves up. They think they have limited beliefs. They think they're sabotaging. They think they're not disciplined. They think they keep sabotaging or something of this nature. They don't have what it takes. They can't stay focused. It's because they're trying to be somebody they're not. You don't need to be motivated to be you. You don't need to be reminded. The true you is sitting inside, surfacing, intuitively wanting to express itself and express your genius. But the moment we compare ourselves to others, instead of compare our daily actions to our own highest values, we cloud it, we shroud it, and we give power away. In any area of our life we don't empower, somebody's going to overpower. And the reason they overpower us is to frustrate us enough to give ourselves permission to be authentic. So the id is trying to live by lower values as a result of the escape of the suppression that we give ourselves when we try to live in other people's values. The true ego is living authentically according to what is really our value, highest value, which we spontaneously want to express. So if you go on my website and go to the value determination process and look at the top value questions to help you determine what's really important to you and start structuring your life on that, come to the breakthrough experience. Let me show you exactly how to do that so you can learn to delegate lower priority things and get on doing something that's deeply meaningful to you, that's inspiring, that's unique, that makes a difference. And there's no reason why you have to live in this mediocrity. You can do something extraordinary, whatever that may be, whether raising a family or going doing something social causes or a business or wealth or health or spiritual pursuits. Whatever it is that's truly highest on your value, you deserve to live. And there's no reason why you can't. So your ego is your highest value. Your id is trying to live by lower values because of the inculcation of outer authorities. And the superego is those injections from outer authorities that you gave power to. So I just want to go over those three things because I think that they are good reminders of how to live it. And if for some reason you want to know what your values are, please go to my website, drdemartini.com, and take advantage of that. Please take advantage of these webinars that we do every week. That gives you this little stimulus every week to think and expand and to utilize. Join me at the breakthrough experience. I want to be able to take what I know and share it with you because I know it works for thousands of people. I know it worked for you. It's just a matter of applying it. And you sometimes, if you get it, the doorbell goes on and all of a sudden a light goes on and you see it. Now you can take action. Teach you how to prioritize and delegate. And also take advantage of our Demartini, Dr. Demartini show, the podcast that we do. Because in our monthly programs, we have a monthly program, about every month or so we have a special program, and I'd like to say something about that. We have a program coming up that is called Clarify Your Goals to Maximizing Your Achievement. Wednesday, the 2nd of December, 11 a.m. To 6 p.m. And to please register for this, go to demartini.inc/ or diagonal / whatever, 58, demartini.inc/58, diagonal 58. And what we're going to do is show you how to maximize goals that are congruent with what you value most so you can wake up your true ego and not let the super egos distract you and get caught puffing yourself up. Whenever we're proud and cocky and self-righteous, we tend to project our values onto others, and it's futility. And then anytime we beat ourselves up and minimize ourselves because we're not living in other people's values, we think we're going to end up going for impulses and instincts and disempower ourselves. I want to show you how to set real goals in real time that give real results that allow you to live authentically or in an inspired way. There's absolutely nothing stopping you from doing that except a little education. That education could go a long way. Within a tiny seed lies a mighty oak. And these ideas, it's time for those ideas in your mind. So please take advantage of that. Take advantage of our weekly programs we're doing. There's one coming up on goals, and definitely come to the breakthrough experience. That's where I can actually take you through it and make you go through the process and learn how to master your life so things on the outside don't run the vision and the mission on the inside. So until next week, this is Dr. Demartini. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking some notes, applying it. If you believe that this is helping you and helping people, if you thought of anybody while you were listening to this that could have benefited by hearing it, please pass the torch and let people know about these weekly programs and what we're doing. Because if we help other people get what we want to get in life, help them get what they want to get in life. We get what we want to get in life. And there's no reason why not to create a catalytic ripple effect by helping people. So thank you for being here with me today.